The crew of the Panzer IV had seen everything. The frozen hell of the Eastern Front. The crushing weight of Soviet armor. They were veterans. They knew the language of war, spoken in the roar of diesel engines and the scream of incoming shells. But here, in the tangled, suffocating hedgerows of Normandy in the summer of 1944, they found a new dialect, a mystery, sitting silent and abandoned in a farmer's field. It was low, sloped. It had no heavy armor. To their eyes, accustomed to the brutal, blocky forms of tigers and panthers, it looked flimsy, almost toy-like. A piece of American junk. They climbed out of their steel coffin, laughing at their luck. A perfect prize. Intel would reward them handsomely for this. They approached it, expecting a trap. They found nothing, just an empty vehicle. As the driver climbed into the unfamiliar cockpit, he shook his head. This was no tiger. It was a death trap. He turned the key. The laughter stopped. The sound that erupted wasn't the grunt of a European war beast. It was the scream of something new, something fast. And in that moment, a single, unnerving thought entered the mind of the German commander. We have no idea what we are fighting. This is the story of the M18 Hellcat. Not just a tank destroyer, but an idea. A radical American answer to a seemingly unsolvable problem. This is the story of how a vehicle that was thinner, lighter, and on paper, weaker than everything it faced, became one of the most feared and effective weapons of the Western Front. This is the story of how engineers decided that if they couldn't build a thicker shield, they would forge a faster spear. By 1944, the Allied forces in Europe faced a tactical nightmare. It had a name, the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger, and its younger, deadlier brother, the Panther. These were not just tanks, they were mobile fortresses. A Tiger's frontal armor was over 100 millimeters thick, virtually impervious to the standard 75-millimeter gun on an American M4 Sherman, at anything but point-blank range. Its own 88-millimeter gun was a legendary anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapon that could kill a Sherman from over 2 miles away. The Panther, while more mobile, shared this terrifying blend of firepower and armor. The American solution, initially, was brute force. Throw more Shermans at the problem. Use mobility and numbers to get flanking shots. But the cost was catastrophic. In some engagements, the kill-loss ratio was 5-1, or worse, in favor of the Germans. American crews were paying for every inch of ground with their blood. They called the journey into combat the road to death. Morale was crumbling. The U.S. Army needed a new solution, and it needed it yesterday. The orthodox answer would be to build a better tank, a heavier tank, an American Tiger. But that would take years. The war would be over and lost. By then they needed something that could be built now, something that fit American industrial philosophy, fast, reliable, and built in overwhelming numbers. Enter a small, focused team of engineers and military thinkers. Their radical idea was this: don't fight their fight. If the German doctrine was based on a single, powerful, well-armored blow, the American doctrine would be based on speed, agility, and a sharp, precise counterthrust. They weren't designing a tank. They were designing a tank destroyer. Its job was not to slug it out toe-to-toe. Its job was to lie in wait, ambush, fire, and then get out. to be somewhere else before the enemy even knew what hit them. This philosophy dictated every single design choice. They took a 400 horsepower, 9-cylinder radial aircraft engine, the same type that powered planes like the B-17, and shoved it into the back of the Hellcat. It was lightweight and incredibly powerful for its size. This was the heart of the beast. This was the most controversial decision. They stripped it away. The Hellcat's armor was paper-thin by World War II standards, just half an inch on the sides. A .50 caliber machine gun could penetrate it. The engineers knew this. They accepted it. Their logic was brutal. Armor you don't need is weight that slows you down. And if a Tiger hits you, it doesn't matter if you have 2 inches of armor or 4, you're dead. So why carry the extra weight? Your armor would be your speed. The 76mm M1 gun. It wasn't the largest gun on the battlefield, but it was a superb balance of power, accuracy, and lightweight design. Firing the new HVAP, high-velocity armor-piercing rounds, it had a real chance of piercing a Panther's mantlet or a Tiger's side armor from a reasonable combat range. The result was a vehicle that weighed only 18 tons, half the weight of a Sherman. And with that 400 horsepower engine, it had a power-to-weight ratio that was unheard of. The math was simple and breathtaking. On paper, it could hit 60 miles per hour. In the field, a governed 55. It was the fastest armored fighting vehicle of the entire Second World War. Let's return to our German crew. Inside the Hellcat, the world was different. It was more open. The controls were simpler. It felt less like an armored bunker and more like the cockpit of a plane. The driver, used to the heavy mechanical steering of his Panzer, found the Hellcat's controls responsive, almost delicate. He pushed the throttle. The vehicle lunged forward. There was no sluggish buildup of power. It was immediate. The suspension, tuned for speed, absorbed the bumps of the field effortlessly. They were doing 30 kilometers per hour, then 40, then 50. The hedgerows began to blur. The commander, his head out of the open turret, felt the wind tear at his uniform. He looked at the speedometer. The needle was climbing past 80 kilometers per hour, 55 miles per hour. For a German tanker, whose world was defined by the 45 kilometer per hour crawl of a Panther or the 25 kilometer per hour slog of a Tiger, this wasn't speed. This was velocity. This was flight. The tactical implications would have been staggering. This American tin can could reposition across an entire battlefield in the time it took a Tiger to simply turn its hull. It could set up an ambush, fire, and disappear into a wood line before German spotters could even call in coordinates. It was a guerrilla fighter in a war of heavyweights. The initial German contempt would have evaporated, replaced by a cold, sinking feeling. They weren't just examining a new vehicle. They were witnessing a fundamental shift in the very physics of armored combat. The rules had changed, and they were now on the wrong side of them. The Hellcat was not a paper tiger. In the hands of skilled crews, it was a devastatingly effective weapon. During the Battle of the Bulge, Hellcats of the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion were instrumental in holding the line at Bastogne. They used their speed to rush from crisis point to crisis point, acting as a fire brigade against the German onslaught. One of the most famous Hellcat actions involved Lieutenant Edwin Leiper. His platoon of 3 Hellcats encountered a column of German tanks, Tsar tanks, and support vehicles. using hit-and-run tactics, popping out of concealment, firing, and then racing to a new position. They destroyed or disabled the entire column, claiming multiple Panthers and a host of other vehicles, without losing a single Hellcat. The crews loved it. They knew its weaknesses, but they trusted its strengths. They painted names on it like Bunny and Hot Stuff. They tallied kill after kill on their gun barrels. The official U.S. military claim is that Hellcats achieved a staggering 5-to-1 kill ratio against enemy armor. It was one of the most successful tracked vehicles of the war. The Hellcat's legacy did not end in 1945. It proved, unequivocally, the value of speed and mobility in armored warfare. The philosophy of the faster spear over the thicker shield influenced post-war vehicle design for decades, from the M24 Chaffee to the M551 Sheridan, and even echoes in today's modern light tanks and wheeled assault vehicles. So what became of our German crew and their captured Hellcat? History doesn't record their specific fate. Perhaps they delivered it to intelligence, who studied it with a mixture of awe and horror. Perhaps it was destroyed by an Allied airstrike. Or perhaps, in a final irony, the very speed that stunned them allowed the Hellcat to escape its captors and return to its own lines. The M18 Hellcat was more than just steel, rubber, and gunpowder. It was a testament to American industrial ingenuity and a different way of thinking. It was the embodiment of a simple, brutal truth. Sometimes, the best way to survive a fight is not to be the strongest, but to be the smartest and the fastest. For the German tankers who thought they had captured a prize, only to find they had tamed a lightning bolt, it was a lesson they would never forget. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the M18 Hellcat, you'll want to watch our next video, where we break down how a single P-47 Thunderbolt's 2,800 horsepower engine turned the tide of the air war. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching.